Hello, my name is Tom Snedden, and I'm the director of the Pennsylvania PACE program, and you're listening to White Canes Connect.
Hey there, PA Federationists. Welcome to another episode of White Canes Connect, presented by the National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania. My name is David Goldstein. I'm the treasurer of the Keystone chapter. Joining me today is co-host Lisa Bryant, vice president number 2 of Keystone. Lisa, how are you today?
I am well, David. How are you?
I am doing great today, and even a little better now that we spoke to Tom and found out that maybe medicine is easier to come by for some of us.
Yes. Thank you to Lynn Heights, our state president, for bringing Tom Snedden of the PACE program to our attention. PACE stands for Pharmaceutical Assistance Contract for the Elderly.
Yes, it does. And for folks who are unaware, there is an easy way to sign up and there is an easy way to get involved. So whether you may need it or you have someone in your family that may need it, maybe an elderly parent or grandparent, or maybe a friend down the street who could qualify, this is an interview you should pay attention to because it could be very helpful for you.
Yes, let's listen.
Tom, thanks so much for being with us today.
It's great to be with you today, David. Lisa?
Welcome to White Canes Connect. You came to our attention through our state president, Lynn Heights. She thought you would be a great guest to talk about the program. So before we even go into what is PACE, let's hear a little bit about you and how you came to run the program.
I'm something of a myth around Harrisburg state government. I've been here over 50 years. And while I've run this program for 38 years, I also ran other programs in the governor's office for Governor Schaub and Governor Thornburg.
So you know where all the bodies are.
I do. Bodies were my business back in the 70s and 80s before I got the drugs.
Oh my goodness. So we have to have you back on. I think there's a part 2 here.
Yeah. People keep telling me I should write a book.
Not a bad idea. So much history that we could really pick your brain on, but that's, again, maybe that's a part 2, maybe even a part 3. But you have been, you said running PACE for 38 years. So have you been the program's only director?
No, there was a director just prior to me for less than a year.
Okay.
But I'm the second director.
Wow.
I've been here for 38 years.
And tell us again what PACE stands for and what is it?
PACE stands for Pharmaceutical Assistance Contract for the Elderly. Okay. This is a benefit that was enacted by the state legislature in 1983. And I can assure you there's not a legislative member left that would remember what this acronym stands for.
My goodness.
But it's not unlike a lot of acronyms in the corporate world. People don't know what the heck they mean. They just know IBM, But what it is a gem. The PACE pharmacy benefit is the most generous pharmacy benefit in the world. It's a comprehensive pharmacy benefit, which has an open formulary, which means we pay basically for any medication that requires a prescription. Mm-hmm. And we don't have any deductibles that people have to pay. We don't have any coverage gaps that people are responsible for. And we don't concern ourselves with the cost of the drug, at least to the extent that it would make it not likely the patient could get the medication. Mm-hmm. We make sure the patient can get the medication. We worry about paying for it on the back end.
Before PACE, it sounds like there must have been a void.
Yes.
How did that? Tell us about how that even was recognized and just all of the, well, I'm sure that's a long story how it finally came to be created, but what were the numbers in terms of what were you seeing in terms of people who weren't able to afford medication and how many people out there needed help?
Well, Lisa, if you go back, about a half a century to the 70s, and you look at medications that were used to treat chronic illnesses like heart disease and arthritis, depression, there weren't a lot of choices. And the choices that were available were really not that expensive. And in the 70s, there weren't nearly as many older people, as there are today. And the older people that were there in the 70s died young. And if they had chronic illnesses, they seemed to have a good way of just ignoring them until it killed them, like hypertension. People just, they just didn't pay any attention to it, and then they died, right?
Yeah.
Or arthritis, they just lived with it, even if it was rheumatoid arthritis, which is awfully painful, or kidney disease. They just didn't pay any attention. But what happened beginning in the 80s was the pharmaceutical industry started to get very good at developing very effective medications to treat these chronic conditions that people have. And there were more and more older people every year. It's significant leaps in the number of older people. And so at the time, Medicare had just come online as a benefit for older Americans, but it didn't have a drug benefit as part of it. It provided for hospitalization, doctor's visits, emergency room visits, but it didn't cover medications. So all of a sudden, by the early 80s, you had a lot of older people, some good medications that they needed, no coverage for it. And it seemed like every month, the cry was getting louder and louder for the government to do something about this. And so here in Pennsylvania, the pharmaceutical industry, the pharmacists, and AARP, the older persons advocacy organization, all got together and introduced a bill in the state legislature to provide the PACE benefit. And it was very contentious. And the governor was very much opposed to it. Governor Thornburgh said he would not approve such a program because it would end up being too expensive. And he was right. But nevertheless, the legislature prevailed. And in November of 1983, Pennsylvania passed this legislation. At the time, New Jersey and Maryland had programs like PACE, but no other state. So we were the third state in the country to do this. And we were only able to do it because of one thing. We had the Pennsylvania lottery, which was generating a lot of profit and revenue. And it was dedicated only to older people. So that made it possible for the legislature to fiscally responsibly pass the legislation and to overcome a threatened veto from Governor Thornburgh. And the rest is history.
Curious, those other states, do they also use their lottery to fund the programs?
Well, New Jersey used their casino revenue to
Okay.
cover the program. The casinos started in New Jersey a little after the lottery started in Pennsylvania. And so that made it possible for them to have their benefit. Maryland did not, but it was a much smaller benefit.
Mm.
So Pennsylvania and New Jersey had what we call a comprehensive pharmacy benefit, where you get first dollar coverage, so there's no deductible, and you get an open formulary, and there are no caps of any kind. Maryland didn't have anything like that. They had a formulary, and it was tightly controlled as to how much you could get. So,
I'm wondering how different the lottery was compared to now. For folks who weren't around back in the mid 70s, there was one number per day. It was a 3-digit number. That was it. So the fact that could fund the program, and it, from what you're saying, it sounds like a vicious cycle. Make better drugs, people last longer. It just keeps going on. But I just wonder the money brought in by the lottery back then in the mid to late 70s or early 80s, I guess, when PACE started, to what it is now, where there's a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5-digit plus one in the afternoon too. So I just can't even imagine. Plus all the other games that you can play, Mega Millions, Powerball, whatever.
Powerball.
Right. So I guess that just helps. So what kind of budget? Is there ever an issue where maybe during COVID, when a lot of people are getting sick and a lot more people maybe need the assistance, how does that wash with maybe extra coverage and needing extra medicines and whatnot?
Well, David, the lottery in Pennsylvania has always been successful. We're in the 52nd year of the lottery now. And I don't know that there's ever been a year that it hasn't been successful, oftentimes beyond anybody's expectations. So when we set the lottery up, its whole purpose was to fund the property tax and rent rebate program.
Okay.
And I don't ever recall the lottery struggling to do that, even though that was a big benefit, still is today. And what happened by the mid 70s was there was quite a surplus developing in the lottery, even after paying for property tax and rent rebate. And that's what made it possible to get the PACE legislation through. Now, as I think through the subsequent history of the lottery, there was only one time, and that was in the late 90s, when the lottery was struggling to pay the costs of property tax and rent rebate, PACE, transportation, and a few other benefits. And what happened in the late 90s was, after being opposed to it for a few years, Governor Ridge agreed to join the national Powerball pool. And that brought in hundreds of millions of extra dollars.
Wow.
And I don't really recall a time since then when the lottery struggled to pay bills, because the lottery has been ever successful every year. So now we've got a lottery that's it's grossing like $4.3 billion annually, and it's netting $1.2 billion for programs like PACE.
That is incredible.
I can tell you from the experience in the 90s, if the lottery ever got in trouble and couldn't pay all its bills, the PACE bills would be the last bills that they wouldn't pay. Nobody, you can deny people tax rebates or rent rebates. You can deny them transportation, but you can't deny them their medication.
Mm-hmm.
That's just out of the question.
Yeah.
So even with COVID, I mean, we didn't have any problems financially. The bigger problem was getting people vaccinated who couldn't or wouldn't leave their homes, which became a real challenge for us.
You know, you were talking about the resistance at one point. I think you said Thornburg,
Right.
but I read, and thank you for some background on you. So tell us about the love of the controversy, or the love of confronting the pharmaceuticals that you said you enjoyed, and a couple of the previous governors also enjoyed. So what actually was that a reference to? What's the fight about?
Well, first of all, I'm a very competitive person. I haven't.
Yeah, we'll get into your physical competitions too before we let you go.
I'm very competitive, so I always enjoy the fight.
Good. Yeah, yeah.
But I'm still a pretty nice guy, and I get along with people, and I enjoy back and forth with people who have different points of view.
Yeah.
And people in the pharmaceutical industry tend to be really nice people. The industry is good at hiring people who are amicable and who can make a good sales pitch. As angry as the pharmaceutical companies were at me over some of the things that I needed to do in order to make this a cost-effective benefit, we were still friends. And even though we would swear at each other and call each other names and drag each other into court, we still got along. So it was fun. It was a joy. I mean, I enjoyed that. Just a little sidebar, I've been in a lot of litigation over the years with the pharmaceutical industry, 20 years of litigation. And there was a case up in Allentown where I was in court. It was a jury trial over some pricing issues with some of the big manufacturers. And during one of the recesses, the judge saw me in the back room kind of cavorting with the defense attorneys and the pharmaceutical bigwigs. And he took great exception to that. And he dismissed the jury, and he turned it into a bench trial. And he refused to let me out of his chambers during recesses later. He wrote a scathing letter to Governor Rendell about my behavior. But the bottom line is, I was enjoying the whole thing, and I got a big settlement out of it for the Commonwealth. And fortunately, Governor Rendell knew me pretty well, and he just laughed about the letters. You don't know this guy, Your Honor.
And I guess you've had that those same sort of confrontations with insurance companies as well?
Insurance companies, the medical society, pharmacies. Yeah, you bet.
And what has been their pushback? Like, what have been the type of,
Lisa,
where you on one side and they're on the other?
It's the old saying, it's all about the money.
Yeah.
It's all about the money. You're taking my money.
Right.
Well, yeah, I am. I'm taking your money because I'm providing a market for your products. And without this benefit, there would be no market for these products.
Yeah.
People in the PACE program can't afford to spend $1,000 a month for drugs. They just can't. That's why they're in the benefit, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was the issue.
Yeah.
Money.
And speaking of the benefits, so there's PACE and there's PACE Net.
Right.
Correct? So tell us the difference between the two.
Well, there's not much difference at all, really. But what happened was, we started the PACE program in '84,
Mm-hmm.
less than a year after the legislation passed, and that that went on for about 13 years, and um, then there was a new governor, Governor Rich, and there were new members in the state Senate and House, and they decided they wanted to increase the income limits for PACE, but they didn't want to call it PACE. And what they said was PACE is for Democrats. We want something for Republicans. Yeah, they would say everybody in PACE is a Democrat. I said I don't have any data to support that, but whatever you say.
That's quite a political commentary they're making there, but
yeah. So they wanted to create a new benefit that was distinctly for higher income people.
mm-hmm.
So the difference between PACE and PACENet is the income limit.
Yeah.
So but otherwise, the only other difference is the co-pays are higher. So, in PACE you pay $6 or $9, depending on whether it's generic or brand, and in PACENet you pay 8 or 15, depending on whether it's generic or brand. But the benefit is the same. It's still an open formulary, and there are no limits of any kind on it.
And still for those 65 and older as well, correct?
Oh yeah, 65 and older, David. It's identical. The out-of-pocket cost for somebody in the benefit is about 8 to 9% of the total drug bill per year, and it's the same for both programs. So there's really no difference.
You were talking earlier about how you've seen the change in, people living longer. And I mean, for 38 years, I'm sure there have been a ton of different changes and trends that you've seen. So tell us a little bit about that. Like even as our economy has gone through all kinds of roller coaster rides, tell us about some of the changes and trends you've seen all these years.
Lisa, it's interesting. There's a lot of trends that don't change in PACE. Mm. So, for example, what we've always seen is that people between the ages of 65 and 75 don't generally sign up for PACE. It's when they get to 75 that people begin to have these chronic problems that become more intense by the year, particularly if it's arthritis. And that's when they sign up for PACE. But when we started the benefit, the average individual was like a 78-year-old female living alone in a private residence. Mm-hmm. Today, it's a 79-year-old female living alone in private. So not much has changed with respect to that trend. What we see that is different is that there are more and more medications that cost more and more money to treat the same illnesses or illnesses that previously weren't treatable, particularly things like neoplasms or cancer. So, today, unlike 40 years ago or 30, even 20 years ago, there just weren't any effective medications to treat cancers. And today, it seems like there's a medication for any kind of cancer at any stage that will, allow you to live longer and live better. And they are frightfully expensive.
Right.
Or take Alzheimer's disease. It seems like to me, it doesn't seem like there's more dementia or Alzheimer's disease among older people. But it does seem like there are more tests that identify it earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you might have dementia and not even know it, but today there are tests that can detect that kind of thing. And then there are medications to treat it. But you've probably heard something of the controversy of late about new Alzheimer's medication.
Yes.
And so, for somebody with Alzheimer's, you might pay $100,000 a year. Of course, you won't. Only the government can afford that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're looking at. That's what's different.
Yeah.
There's more older people, but people that have had illnesses in the past that weren't responsive to medications, that's changed. There are more medications for people that have those kind of diagnoses. And these medications are getting more and more expensive.
And to date, how many folks are receiving benefits through PACE?
Let's see. Today we have about 205,000 people in the benefit, and that number is at really an all-time low. And what has happened is, we've increased the income limits more than $10,000 just over the past several years. But the trend keeps running lower, and the enrollment trend. And the reason for that is the expansion of Medicaid that we did here back in 2015. And then again, it was hyped up with COVID. Well, now what you're starting to hear is that's going to be reversed. And people are going to be falling out of Medicaid. And when that happens, those people will come into the PACE program. And that's a trend that we're a little concerned with.
If somebody's listening and they want to get involved, get on to the PACE program, or if they have a family member that would qualify, how would they go about it?
It's very simple, David. Just all they have to do is know about 10 numbers. 800-225-7223. Call that number and you will talk to somebody who will complete an application online, real time for you. You don't have to get a paper application. You don't have to go to your pharmacy or your doctor's office to get it. We'll do it for you right on the phone. Okay. And it's not likely we'll need any documentation from you. If we know your name and we know where you live, we'll find you in our database. Okay. We're the government.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. When we had the state convention in Pittsburgh a few months back, and I took a trip to the emergency room, and I never gave any kind of ID. I gave them my name, my social security number, and my birth date, and that was enough for them. That was enough for them to track me down after, and then find out insurance information if they needed to, or send me a bill if they already had that.
Yeah, so. It's all there. And I have access to all that. Only that, I have access to tax databases, Social Security data.
Right, which you have to have.
Why would I bother you for any documents?
Right.
Wow.
It's crazy. It's a
so all people really have to know before calling that number is the income eligibility. So why don't we just spell those out?
Well, even if you forget about your income. I mean, if you need help paying for prescription medications, we can help you.
Oh, that's good.
So, on top of PACE and PACE Net, And let's just go to that income limit for a moment. If you're a married couple, Lisa, it's 41,500 in 2022. We're just looking at the prior year income. And if you're single, it's 34,500. But let's say you're above that 5,000. You could be double that. And you have a prescription for a medication that's going to cost you $3,000 a month. Well, even if you have an $80,000 income, that's going to be a little hard to handle, right?
Right.
So we have what we call the PACE Clearinghouse. And the PACE Clearinghouse will help anybody 18 years of age or older, regardless of income, regardless. So when I'm talking to groups of people about applying for help in the PACE program, I said, don't even worry about your income.
Okay. I'm glad you said that.
Make an application. I find people who think they have more income than they really do. So that helps those people, but it also helps people that are well above the income.
That is really good to know. So people don't need to, oh, I don't qualify. I might as well not even bother. It's worth picking up the phone. And for those seniors who might be a little tech savvy, I'm assuming there's an online application.
Oh, absolutely. Just Google PACE Cares. You'll find this. You can go online and do it. And, to be fair, you can go to a legislative district office and do this. Insurance agents do this for people. You can ask your doctor's office. You can ask a pharmacist. There's no shortage of places that you can get help with an application. But, the easiest thing to do is just pick up the phone and call us.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. I have psoriatic arthritis, and there was an issue with my insurance about a year ago, and I went about 2 months without anything. And I said, "Is there?" And the medicine is ungodly expensive, $4,000 to $5,000 a month. And I asked the insurance company. I said, "Well, if you're not going to pay for it, how do I get it taken care of?" We don't know. And when I asked the specialty pharmacy where I got it from, how can I take care of that? And somebody there helped me and gave me some numbers. None of them were yours. And now that I know, it would have helped me. It would help me in the beginning of last year get through that. But that is good to know. So again, it's 800-225-PACE. Is that correct?
That's correct. But it's interesting, David. Every week I get reports on we ask people, how did you hear about us? And every week, 50% of the responses are my insurance agent. My insurance company told me. It's without fail for years. The insurance companies love PACE because to the extent that we'll pay the bill, and they don't have to. That's great. Here we are. We're back to the money.
Right.
Back at them. It always goes back to the dollars.
It's always about the money.
I'm just curious, Tom. I don't know if you could speak specifically to this, but I just wonder if, we do reach an audience that's primarily blind and visually impaired. Any program services that people might want to consider PACE for covering? First of all, the fact that they can call and not have to fight a possibly inaccessible website is that's one great advantage right there.
And talk to a real person.
And talk right, exactly, not a bot or I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
And get this. Somebody that'll care about them. That's the amazing thing.
But I wonder if there's some prescriptions, medications that you've seen that are particular to the blindness community that PACE might help fill some sort of gap in covering.
There are medications for certain eye diseases that we cover. Any medication that's prescription for eye diseases. And diseases of the eye, particularly in your 80s and 90s, can be pretty severe. And so we pay for those.
Yeah.
We've been working with a pharmacy, accessible pharmacy, and Lynn is involved with them. And we have been, trying to identify markers, drugs that will lead us to people in the PACE enrollment who might be blind or deaf. And there's only a few that we've identified at this point that are markers for blindness.
But that's great. You're trying to get ahead of it.
Yes, we are. We figure, given the number of deaf and blind people in the population, we figure that in our enrollment, there are probably tens of thousands of those people, and we don't know it.
Yeah.
I have to be honest. A funny story is, Lynn used to work for me as an intern 20 years ago.
Get out of here.
And I didn't really remember her, but she reached out about 2 years ago and said, "Can you help us? Can you help me in accessible pharmacy?" And I said, "Well, how could I do that?" We talked and we met and we got together with people at Accessible Pharmacy. And I thought to myself at one point, how could I be so unaware of how difficult it might be for somebody who is blind or deaf to just walk into a retail pharmacy and get their medications? It never occurred to me. I had no idea. And I just wow, that's something we can help with. That's something we have to be doing, But, so now we're at it, Lisa. We're at it. We're on it.
I think it's a wonderful partnership.
Yeah.
So before we, close out, we would really be remiss if we didn't acknowledge your championships, your sports accomplishments. You are quite the runner.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So how many marathons? Go ahead, Brad.
I only did about 40 marathons.
Oh my gosh.
If I'd have done more than that, I probably wouldn't be running today. Anybody I used to run with that did marathons a lot isn't running today. They wore out. But I was always a very fast runner, and I enjoyed running, particularly in competitive events. And so I thought over 50 years ago, I need to do something now that I'm no longer in school and I'm not playing football and wrestling and basketball and all that. And I turned to running. And I honest to God, at least I thought it was going to kill me. Because I was only 100, 200 meter guy. I never did any quarter mile or crazy distance like that. But, but then, I found out that it worked. I lost weight. And I felt good. And at that time, nobody was really doing much competitive running. But a couple of years later, running was all the rage. And I think it's been that way ever since. And so I just developed OCD. It was an impulsive compulsive disorder that I had to do this.
It's your drug.
It is. It really is. And it's not like I feel any kind of different state of being when I run. I just enjoy the exercise.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've done practically all my life now.
So you've run over 1,000 miles in marathons. And I'm sure, do you do 5Ks and 10Ks along the way throughout the year? Or you just stick to the marathons?
No, David, I did, I would say 1,500 races over the past 40 years.
Wow.
Competitive races. And I generally won them. And I just so enjoyed that. But I really get wacky
if you don't run.
if I'm running out of time during a given day and I can't run.
Mm-hmm.
People will say to me, "Go run, get out of here, just get out of here."
Oh, that is very commendable. I doff my hat to you. I might be surprised how fast I could run if I were being pursued, but otherwise,
no,
not my lane at all.
You might
right,
be
or running for
that,
something.
You might be surprised how much you like it.
This is true. This is true. It's never too late, right? Never too late. So other than paying the lottery, how can people continue to support the program, or what would you like to put out there to let people know that you're available and that people might be surprised at what they could receive?
I just remind people the number that they can call to get help. And we really have very, very good people on those phones that are they're very empathetic with anybody, and they'll try to help any way they can, and we'll try to help you with anything. I have people that have driven to Philadelphia to get people hearing aid batteries.
Oh, wow.
For their hearing aid, or go to their homes and do their wash for them. Or just put a $50 in the mail to them, $50 bill in the mail.
Yeah,
they
have a heart.
They have a heart, and they get as much out of helping people as I get out of running. They love it. I mean, they just love it. I'm just
so
happy.
When you call that number, where are the people? Is it one big call center, or is it people that work from home? Where do the calls go when you call 1-800-225-PACE?
On that particular number, David, they come in here to Harrisburg. But we have 3 or 4 other call centers outside of Harrisburg.
Okay.
And they're in Philadelphia. So we have a call center in Philadelphia that's aimed at doing outbound calls to people.
Okay.
Not receiving inbound, but doing outbound calls to people who we believe are eligible for PACE or other benefits who are not enrolled. And we make them aware of that. And if they're interested, we do their application on the phone for them. So it's not just PACE. It's property tax and rent rebate, a SNAP benefit, a senior food box benefit, LIHEAP. So that's a big call center. We also have in Philadelphia an Asian call center because there's a large Asian population in Philadelphia that we've been reaching out to over the past decade to make sure that they have PACE and other public benefits that they might be eligible for. And then we also have at the School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania a call center that does telemedicine for people who have opioid overuse disorders, or they have anxiety disorders, or they're a caregiver for somebody with dementia. So if you're calling into Harrisburg and you need that kind of help, they'll switch you to one of those other call centers.
Okay.
If you're Asian, you're not able to speak much English, or you're trying to take care of somebody with dementia, you have anxiety disorders, we're going to help you.
And an average application process typically takes how long? One on the phone, the actual process, and then to go to actually be approved.
Well, I'll tell you, to do a PACE application, which is probably the simplest benefit application in government, It doesn't. It really doesn't take an operator more than maybe 10 minutes.
Okay.
Now, once that application is done and it goes into the process for approval, it can take up to a day.
That is
All right?
great.
A maximum of 3 business days. That's it.
This really doesn't sound like any kind of government program.
It's not.
Sounds easy and fast.
We're not government. Honest to God, we're not.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting at our outbound call center in Philadelphia, operators stay on the phone with people for an hour and a half to do 6 to 7 different applications. But here in Harrisburg, it doesn't take more than 10 to 11 minutes to do that, if that.
And we should let you give that number and website one more time.
Well, it's 800-225-7223. In other words, 800-225-PACE. And then you can go to the website, just Google PACE Cares, PACECARES. You'll come to our website.
I will put that in the show notes, both things, so folks can get right there.
Tom, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Joy.
Thank you so much for bearing with us as we set this up. It was really nice having you. And any final comments that you wanted to make before we let you go?
Well, I think that anybody listening, even if they don't think they need the help, I'm guessing they have a neighbor, friend, relative, spouse, somebody who may need help in making life better. And that's what they should call us. Calling's better because you're talking to somebody who really cares.
Thank you, Tom.
Oh, David, Lisa, thank you both so much.
Thanks again to Tom for stopping by and giving us all the information on the PACE program. And Lisa, it's very important that whether you think you qualify or not, just give the number a call.
It is definitely worth a phone call. I didn't know that there are ways you could be eligible without having to be 65. So that was news for me. And I hope folks will take advantage of the fact that you can actually speak to a live person. And as Tom said more than once, you're going to get somebody who's going to really listen to and really wants to try to help you.
Again, for folks, especially those who are blind, you don't have to worry, as you mentioned in the interview, whether the site is accessible or any of that. You call up, you talk to somebody who's based in Harrisburg, most likely. But as Tom mentioned, there's some other call centers in the state. If the Harrisburg one is not one that you need, but it'll help you. And it could just be a godsend for somebody who can't afford the medication that they need.
So what else is going on in the affiliate?
Well, one thing that we could tell you about is the parents of blind children are having a candy fundraiser that goes to the beginning of April. So I'll have a link in the show notes so you can go right over there and place your order for all sorts of great treats. And again, it benefits the parents of blind children. Give that a check. And otherwise, if you've got an idea for us, please reach out. We want to hear from you. You can give us a call at 267-338-4495. You've got up to 3 minutes. Please leave your name and town. If you do leave a message, something you love, something you hate, something you want us to have on an upcoming show, anything you've got, a tip that you do around your house, whether it's cooking or when you're out and about, how you maneuver certain streets or certain circumstances, please give us a call, 267-338-4495.
And you can always email us. Our email address is whitecanesconnect@gmail.com.
Lisa, it was another great show. Tom gave us a lot of good information on how to get involved. And again, if you don't need to get onto the PACE program, but you really want to help, just go buy a lottery ticket. And maybe it's a win-win. Maybe you win some money and you're also helping older Pennsylvanians.
Helping older Pennsylvanians every day. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thanks for listening. Take care.